Hi everyone, it's Shotzi for the Rough Cuts on Sunday. Continuing on with this month of horror films, today I'm going to be talking about a science fiction horror film. If you even want to call it a film, this is a flick. It is Night of the Lepus from 1972. This is possibly one of the worst movies ever to have been made. It's terrible. It's really terrible. Okay, let me give you a little like background history. Like some of you know, I was a zoology major. That was my undergrad, zoology. And so we had to learn about ecology, and we talked about 1859 in Australia. What had happened during that time is that you had British that were over in Australia, and some of the higher ups were feeling a little homesick, so they wanted to bring some animals over from the UK. One of these animals was the rabbit. So they brought over just a small number of rabbits, it wasn't even 30, and within 10 years, this small number of rabbits became millions. And by 1950, from something like 12 or 24 rabbits, had numbered in over, I think it was like 600 million rabbits by 1950. So, 91 years, you have 600 million rabbits. And over that time frame, they had tried to develop a lot of different ways to control the rabbit population because they were absolutely devastating Australia. They were eating all of the flora. Something like one in every eight mammals were being wiped off of the face of Australia. And so in the early 1900s, they built a rabbit fence. This rabbit fence spanned something like over 2,000 miles, basically trying to stop the rabbits from proceeding west and devastating Western Australia. So this was effective for a little while, but then rabbits, they start jumping over the fence, burrowing under the fence. So then in 1950, they developed a kind of serum based off of a viral infection in rabbits, myxomatosis. And so this viral infection is fatal to rabbits. So they started using this to kill off the rabbit population. And sure enough, the population went from about 600 million down to 100 million. But then the strongest rabbits became resistant to this and started breeding. So, of course, the numbers shot up again. And that brings us into the world of science fiction. In 1964, Russell Braddon wrote a book, The Year of the Angry Rabbit, and he's a satirist. And in this book, you have, the same problem, the rabbit problem, and they develop the myxomatosis. They give it to the rabbits, kills off a bunch of them, but then you have the resistant rabbits. So they develop super mix. And so when you have this super mix, the Prime Minister of Australia decided to use this as biological warfare and, like, take over the world and develop this fascist regime. So, meanwhile, while he's building up this fascist regime, you have the rabbits that are mutating, becoming violent, becoming bloodthirsty, and they're on their way to wiping out human civilization. Now, had the creators, or rather A.C. Lyles, who's a producer of Night of the Lepus, had he actually stuck to that story, he would have had a decent movie, but he didn't. The writers of Night of the Lepus got rid of all of that, and they just kept the violent, bloodthirsty rabbit part of it, except they made the rabbits huge, like 150 pounds or something like that. And it's just, this is ridiculous. This is a schlock movie. It's like they took a really good story, it's funny, very dark humor, and they just kind of chewed it up and then sprayed out a bunch of corn-ridden diarrhea onto the screen that is Night of the Lepus. It's entertaining, kind of. It's a great cast. You have a lot of really good actors. William F. Claxton, I believe, is the director of this film. And he did mostly westerns. So you have a lot of western stars, mainly Rory Calhoun, who was a big movie star, but he also did westerns too. Also, Stuart Whitman stars in this. DeForest Kelley, he was in a lot of westerns, but some of you may be more familiar with him from Star Trek as Dr. McCoy. And Janet Leigh is also in this, as well as Paul Fix in a supporting role. And so you have a lot of really strong actors, but the script is just terrible. And like in interviews with Janet Leigh, when she's talking about this, she took it because it was convenient, and she said that the script read a lot better than what was actually depicted, because it wasn't until several days within shooting that they realized the director of this was not really meant to direct science fiction at all, because it's terrible. This is a terrible, terrible movie. The premise of this story is that it's set in the American Southwest, and you have a farmer played by Rory Calhoun, and he has a rabbit problem. You're up at the rabbit fence, and you have all of these farmers who are trying to corral the rabbits and ultimately kill the rabbits. And so they're trying to figure out how to curtail this rabbit population, and he doesn't want to use poison because that'll kill all of the animals, not just the rabbits. So DeForest Kelley's character proposes that he meet with a couple that he knows who are scientists that work with insects and trying to control them through non-poisonous means. So they will control their own population. So he says, okay, we'll give it a shot. This couple, which is played by Janet Leigh and Stuart Whitman, they say, rabbits aren't really our bag, but we'll give it a whirl. So they get some of the rabbits, and they have this hormonal serum that they're going to inject into them to see if it can stop their breeding cycle. So they, of course, have a little girl, as all married scientists in sci-fi films do, and she falls in love with the cute little bunnies, and she wants one. So, of course, she switches rabbits, one of the injected rabbits, with the control group, and she's like, oh, well, can't I have one before you kill them? So they're like, okay, take one of the controls. So she takes the one that she switched, because that was her favorite, and then she loses the rabbit almost like immediately. And so the rabbit goes into a hole and spreads this biological mutation among all of the other rabbits. And so this causes the rabbits to become huge, 150-pound, violent, bloodthirsty vermin who are out to kill the human population. So there's a lot of blood, there's gore, there's fire and explosions. You've got a lot of things going on in this film. It's basically a throwback to Them. If you ever saw Them, this movie has a lot of parallels to it, but it's not as good. I suggest you watch Them instead of this movie. Although, as entertaining as this is, you've got a lot of slow motion, running rabbit shots. That's basically all this movie has to offer. It's so bad. It really is. It's really, really horribly bad. This movie, it's bad. It isn't even worth like the $3 I paid for this. That's how bad this movie is. I mean, I guess you can call it a cult classic, simply because of how bad it is, but that's about it. That's its only redeeming quality. Rory Calhoun did some other sci-fi. He also did Motel Hell, which is highly entertaining. You should watch that. Watch Motel Hell instead of watching this. If you've seen this, okay. If you haven't, you're not really missing anything. Like they played it straight because once again they thought it was a serious movie when they were making it, and then they realized that they were in too deep, and they couldn't get out, so they went ahead with this. And if you see stills from this, it looks like a Western because basically you have Western director, Western producer. It's shot in old Tucson. You've got the Western setting, all these Western actors, except you've got giant, ferocious rabbits in it. And I mean, seriously, rabbits are not scary. Even if you make them 150 pounds, even if you've got like the men in bunny costumes jumping on the people like you have in this, I'm not even kidding about that. It has no redeeming qualities. Okay, but if you're up for it, give it a whirl. If you see this somewhere, go ahead and watch it. It is not a great piece of work at all. Slow motion rabbit. If you like slow motion rabbits, watch this, especially if they're smeared in blood. Go ahead and watch this movie. Otherwise, I will see you all next week. Until then, bye bye.